thou'rt now a blade of the Darkmoon, the only knight of our company. Swear this oath, and face thy solemn duty.
The Blades of the Darkmoon is a covenant that defines itself as a defender of the gods, punishing those that would dare to offend them. At the forefront of the group sits Dark Sun Gwyndolin, commanding his faithful followers to kill any that should act against him or his godly counterparts. And that information is about all you'll find on the mainstream Dark Souls wiki pages, meaning that to really understand the history of this covenant, we're going to have to rely on item descriptions, cut content, and inferences. I first want to begin our exploration in DS1, where the Covenant is the most prevalent and seems to be the most thoughtfully incorporated into the game. In order to join, you must travel to the tomb beneath Anor Londo and pledge your fealty to Gwyndolin. This will only be possible if you, unsurprisingly, haven't killed Gwyndolin or his sister Guinevere, although you can be absolved of this latter sin, allowing you to join anyway. And once you have successfully become a member, it will be time to fulfill your duty to Gwyndolin. Within DS1, there is an item called the Book of the Guilty. The description of this book, purchased from Oswald of Karim, reads, "The goddess of sin, Velka, oversees this list of the guilty, who have disrespected the gods or their covenants, and shall one day face the wrath of the Blades of the Darkmoon." A player can wind up in this book by doing things like killing NPCs or invading and killing other players. An indictment can be used by the victim of an invader to essentially report them, leading to the invader's name being added to the Book of the Guilty, and thus the Blade's hit list. A Covenant member can invade the world of a sinner by either using the Blue Eye Orb or by equipping the Darkmoon Blade Covenant Ring, which will summon them according to Gwyn's will. Upon invading and successfully killing a sinner, the member will be rewarded with a souvenir of reprisal, which can then be given to Gwyndolin to rise within the ranks. And now that we have an understanding of the mechanics of the Covenant, let's get into some of the lore. The biggest question that we have to answer here is the connection between Dark Sun Gwyndolin and Velka, the goddess of sin. And there is clearly a link here, as the description for the Book of the Guilty reveals that the Blades choose their victims from the index kept by Velka herself. On its surface, this may seem to imply that there's a kind of symbiotic relationship between the gods, as Velka chooses those to be punished, and Gwyndolin sees that it's done. And while I would like to do individual videos on both of these characters, much of their lore is outside of the scope of this video. But I do still think it's important to give some kind of explanation of their stories, especially when it comes to Velka. Starting with Gwyndolin, I'm going to keep this section incredibly short, as if you're watching this video, you probably already have a basic understanding of his lore. Dark Sun Gwyndolin is the last-born son of Gwyn, and is known for his affinity for magic. After Gwyn sacrificed himself to Link the First Flame, and the established order began to crumble, Gwyndolin opted to stay in Anor Londo. He maintained order via an illusion of his sister Guinevere, who had since fled the kingdom. In DS1, Gwyndolin remains in Anor Londo, where we find him and join his covenant. Now, as for Velka, there's pretty much no concrete backstory, and we rely on mentions of her within item descriptions to piece together the story of her life. It can be inferred from her great power and prevalence in-game that she was initially an ally to the royal family, although in what capacity is unclear. At some point, she falls out of favor with them, which is potentially what sets into motion her plot to kill them. Velka, along with some other big names like Havel the Rock, attempted to steal Gravelord Nito's power and use it against the gods. We learn this from the description of the effigy shield, which reads, "In an ill-fated plot to destroy the very gods, the followers of the occult once attempted to steal the power of Gravelord Nito, the first of the dead." Velka is referred to as a rogue deity and a ruler of the occult throughout the game, providing evidence that she was the one to lead this scheme. And there's so much more that proves her involvement in this, but again, I want to save that for a Velka specific video, so for the sake of brevity, just trust me on this. Velka's plot fails, completely alienating her from the royal family and casting a grim shadow over her name. And now that we have an understanding of these two, the complexity of this story becomes evident. The Book of the Guilty now begins to reveal itself as not only a list of the Darkmoon Blade's targets, but also a list of Velka's followers. And if at this point you're beginning to think that this whole Velka thing sounds like it could be a covenant of its own, you wouldn't be far off. There's actually cut content that reveals that there was initially meant to be a covenant dedicated to Velka, and that its followers would hunt down and kill members of the Blades of the Darkmoon. Velka and Gwyndolin were clearly intended to be closely intertwined, which leads me to believe that before her excommunication from the family, she and Gwyndolin were particularly friendly. So friendly, in fact, that they initially intended to rule the Blades of the Darkmoon together. And so the Book of the Guilty was created, allowing Velka to label the sinners and Gwyndolin to punish them. However, after Velka's defection, the book came to represent a list of her followers, and thus a list of Gwendolin's enemies. Taking a look at their respective talismans further proves this connection, as Gwendolin's Darkmoon talisman allows the user to cast sorceries based on faith instead of intelligence, while Velka's talisman allows the user to do the exact opposite, casting miracles using intelligence over faith. Initially, their shared covenant would have drawn on both of their strengths to punish those that would offend the gods, but when Velka herself committed such a sin, the alliance was doomed. And that is essentially the story insofar as it reveals itself in DS1. Velka betrays the royal family, fracturing her relationship with Darksun Gwyndolin and leading to a shift in purpose of the covenant. Now that Velka has chosen to side against the gods, the Blades of the Darkmoon consider her and her followers as sworn enemies. But before we move on to the later games, I have a working theory that I'd like to share with you. This is something to be fleshed out in a Velka-specific video, but I wanted to share this kind of jumbled string of thoughts here as well, as I'm kind of trying to work through it myself. So, members of the Covenant use souvenirs of reprisal to prove their loyalty, as these are dropped by slain followers of Velka. And interestingly, Lautrec of Karim will drop one, implying that he is a follower. And remember Oswald of Karim, the man that sells us the book? It hardly seems a coincidence that the two men hailing from Karim are followers of her, pointing to Velka likely having a great deal of influence over the region and its people. Now, if you watched my video about Aegon, Irina, and the Way of White, you might be starting to put the pieces together. Remember, Gwyndolin led the Covenant and settled its home base in Karim. Then, a strange goddess going by the name Keitha appeared and immediately inserted herself into the Covenant, even having the Cathedral of the Deep built in her honor. But Keitha, Goddess of Tears, is likely just the title that Velka took to disguise herself and work her way into Gwendolin's new covenant. Keep in mind the similarities between Aegon and Irina and Lautrec and his Firekeeper. This culture of Firekeeper production and transportation only became commonplace after Keitha, Velka, started pulling the strings within the Way of White, and is a clear callback to Lautrec in DS1. The intricacies of this theory are better saved for later, but I did want to lay it out here just to kind of set the stage for how Velka's influence would continue to span across games. And now to briefly touch on the Covenant's presence in DS2. While the Blades of the Darkmoon are not a joinable covenant in this game, its counterpart, the Blue Sentinels, is. In DS2, the Blue Sentinels essentially fill the role of the Blades, although they specifically protect those within the Way of Blue covenant. Interestingly though, there is evidence of Velka's presence in this game, in the form of Cromwell the Pardoner, who dons the Judgment Set, which reads, a mask, robe, manchettes, tights, honoring an ancient goddess. Sin was said to be her domain, but the name of the goddess is long forgotten. So, while the Blades of the Darkmoon and its sworn enemy, Velka, are not directly mentioned in DS2, it seems that hints of their existence exist even in Drangleic. And finally, to discuss the lore as it relates to DS3, by this point in the series, there's a lot of dispute about the actual purpose of the Covenant, and I'll admit that I think that the devs could have done a much better job of integrating it into the game and distinguishing it from the Blue Sentinels. In DS3, The Blades of the Darkmoon and the Blue Sentinels essentially do the exact same thing. When a member of the Way of Blue is invaded, one of these phantoms will be summoned to kill the invader. So what exactly led to these covenants being so similar, and what's the real difference between them? The description for the Blades of the Darkmoon reads as follows. When a member of the Way of Blue faces a dark spirit, the Blades of the Darkmoon, by an ancient accord, help to root out the invader. But why would they agree to work with the Blue Sentinels? While reading a Steam community thread, I saw someone distinguish between the two by saying that one is a protector and one is a hunter, and that made a lot of sense to me. The Blue Sentinels are protectors of their brethren in the Way of Blue, while the Blades of the Darkmoon are hunters of any that stray from the path of their god and commit a sin, like invading another player. The Blades of the Darkmoon don't specifically care about those within the Way of Blue. Rather, it was decided long ago, perhaps at the inception of the Blue Sentinels, that the Blades would kill those who attack the Way of Blue, not for the victim's sake, but for the sake of their own god. So, while mechanically these two covenants are essentially identical, their ideology is completely different. In both DS1 and 3, the Blades of the Darkmoon take an ear from their victim to prove their victory. In DS1, this is known as a souvenir of reprisal, and in DS3, it's known as a proof of a concord kept, and is interestingly the same trophy that the Blue Sentinels take. However, one stark difference between the two is that the Blades have a specific hatred for the Aldrich Faithful Covenant. Each time a member succeeds at killing someone in this covenant, they'll receive a proof of a concord well kept, which is equivalent to 2 of the common proofs. This rivalry can be explained by Aldrich's grave sins of consuming men, and encouraging his followers to do the same. There also may be a connection between Velka and the Covenant, as I believe Velka's influence to be the reason for Gwyndolyn's death at the hands, or gaping maw, of Aldrich. The Aldrich Faithful Covenant is essentially the antithesis to everything that the Blades stand for, and following the death of Gwyndolin, this hatred is solidified. Unfortunately, we don't get to see the real Gwyndolin in DS3, as by the time we enter the picture, he's already been eaten. This means that there's no concrete proof that the Blades targeted the Aldrich Faithful before Gwyndolyn's death, but I still find it incredibly likely. I like this theory because 1, it further distinguishes the Blades from the Blue Sentinels, and 2, it gives you an alternative theory if you don't believe that Velka orchestrated Gwyndolyn's death. Aldrich would have reason to target Gwyndolin if his Blades had been attacking the Aldrich Faithful Covenant. Maybe he thought that the attacks would end if the Blades no longer had their beloved god. He could not have been more wrong though, as this seems to have only strengthened their resolve. Aldrich's mistake was believing that their loyalty to Gwyndolin was conditional. And finally, I want to discuss 2 NPCs that are confirmed members of the Blades of the Darkmoon. The first is the Anor Londo Firekeeper in DS1, known as the Darkmoon Knightess. She's essentially just a firekeeper with interesting lore, and doesn't impact the story much, if at all. But if you're also a member of the Darkmoon Blades, she does have a unique piece of dialogue.
Oh, you are one of us. That is a surprise, but a pleasant one. We are both Blades of the Darkmoon now. I shall look forward to fighting alongside you.
And she will become hostile if you attack the illusion of Guinevere or Darksun Gwyndolin. The only information that we get about her lore comes from the description of her armor set, which reads, Armor of the Darkmoon Knightess, Firekeeper of Anor Londo. After becoming undead, she visited the Darksun Gwyndolin at the Mausoleum of the Spiral Depths, becoming a Blade of the Darkmoon, and assumed the flame-keeping duty. She received this armor, which hides her hideous form and helps her hunt the guilty. And I want to mention that I've seen some theorizing that she comes from Kareem, but I just haven't found a lot of evidence to support that, so I'm not entirely sold. The idea is essentially based on the fact that she uses a parrying dagger, which is known to be a favorite among Knights of Kareem. So maybe that's proof, but it honestly doesn't seem all that important either way, so it's really up to you what you think. And now, onto Cirrus of the Sunless Realm. We encounter her in DS3, where we learn that she is a Blade of the Darkmoon on a quest to kill her grandfather, Hodrick. Holy Knight Hodrick is the leader of the Moundmaker's Covenant, who invade other players' worlds as mad phantoms, aiming to kill the Host of Embers and anyone else that might be there. Obviously, Cirrus being a member of the Blades would make her and her grandfather enemies, and interestingly, you can actually be summoned into her world to help her kill him. During her questline, a unique budding green blossom will also appear in the shrine handmaiden's wares, with a description that seems to be a goodbye note from Cirrus to her grandmother. This has led many to believe that the shrine handmaiden is actually Cirrus's grandmother, which would make Hodrick, the handmaiden's husband, ex-husband, late husband, I'm not really sure. Cirrus has a very interesting questline that leaves many questions to be answered, but as far as her relation to the Blades of the Darkmoon, she's clearly a very dedicated member, so dedicated that she vows to kill her grandfather, whom she considers to be a sinner in the eyes of her god. The Blades of the Darkmoon are often held in high esteem by the DS community, seen as pious warriors that punish any who offend their mighty god, Gwyndolin. And while this reputation is understandable and well earned, I think it's important to keep in mind that Gwyndolin is not the only god, and that his goal of prolonging an age of fire could be seen as a mercy or a torture, depending on who you ask. The lore of the Blades is so compelling, and I think it's a shame that their place in DS3 seems lazily designed. I think that they should have been better distinguished from the Blue Sentinels, or if the devs intended the two to be connected, that should have been better fleshed out. The mechanic of the blue eye orb also should have been brought over to DS3, as it would have greatly improved the playability of the Covenant. I'm also pained by the fact that we never got a Velka Covenant, as I think that would have been a really awesome PvP mechanic and really cool from a lore standpoint. But that's all I have for this episode. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much. This one was quite difficult for me, as there really isn't a lot of information about the Covenant beyond its basic mechanics. And when it comes to Velka, her lore is a headache to put together. But nonetheless, I enjoyed the challenge, and I hope that you enjoyed seeing the finished product. I've also been streaming my first playthrough of DS2, so if you've been keeping up with that, thank you so much. I've been having a lot of fun with it. And if you want to join in on the streams, I always make a YouTube post before I go live, or if you want more frequent updates and just kind of random chatting, you can join the Discord. The link for that will be in the description. Or I also have the VODs saved in a playlist if you just want to see the progress so far. But that's all I've got for this video. As always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, don't go hollow.